It doesn't matter which PR is being portrayed where, all PR is good PR.
TV umpire to director, we have a player review. Can we rock and roll, please?
Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of Bits and Pieces. This is a cricket podcast where friends get together and talk about things that's happening in the world of cricket. For the last few weeks, we have been talking about the IPL, we have been talking about India's tour of various countries, we've been talking about the Women's World Cup, but today's episode is completely different because we are not going to talk about any of the cricket that's going on in the world right now. Instead, we are going to talk about a cricket movie. The movie 83 released a few weeks back. It's essentially a movie about India's victory in their first World Cup victory in 1983. It's an interesting movie, and I think some of us watched it and we realized that there are a lot of things we would like to talk about. So now, without any further ado, let me just go forward and introduce the set of people who are itching to come forward and talk about this amazing movie. First, he has a great voice and he has some deceptive pace. Welcome to the Roger Binney of today's episode. Say hi, Srinath. When your potential realized, tell us now.
I like that you've chosen a shortcut in the absence of a Tony-like detailed intro. Now, most of us can't follow that. But hello again. Are you the Kapil Dev of this podcast then? Is that what it is?
No, I am the PR Man Singhs of this podcast because my job is to stop people from going to the bathroom and ask for Lord's tickets. But yeah. Along with the deceptive pace of Roger Binney is someone who's here to set up Viv Richards. And he has a long setup and he has a punchline at the end of it. Joining us all the way from the United States. Say hi to the Madan Lal of today's podcast. Say hi, Karthik.
Hi. Hello.
There is an idli wala who is out in Bombay. Everybody thinks he's out there to sell idlis, but he's not. He's looking for a suitable husband for his wonderful South Indian daughter. And he has found him, except he does not know it yet. Say hi to the chica of today's podcast. Say hi, Kaustubh.
Wow, I like this intro. Like this is quite good. Yeah, I fully approve. Yes.
I'm literally making it along as it goes along. And then, just like Mohinder Amarnath, who was in the team, out the team, in the team, out the team, but when he was in, he really delivered. Say hi to the Amarnath of this podcast. Joining us all the way from Gujarat, Rachana.
Wow, talk about one, performance pressure, and secondly, the Lalan Amarnath of my life is upstairs and has been talking to me about the 1983 World Cup. I'm referring to my mother, by the way, not my father, who knows nothing about cricket. Thank you, Praveen.
Nice. That is actually something that I didn't expect would happen, but here we are. For all listeners, you'd remember Rachana. Rachana joined us a few weeks back when we spoke about the Women's World Cricket Tournament, and now we are back to discuss about the 1983 movie. Okay, does anybody want to talk about what their early impressions were when they just finished watching the movie? What was your first emotion? Just when you finished it.
Pleasantly conflicted about this movie. What I mean by that is, okay, look, before I watched it, I didn't even watch it in the theater or anything, right? I waited until it came out on Netflix and then I watched it once it came out on Netflix. I thought, okay, here we go. This is just going to be yet another disaster, right? It's going to be one of those things that Bollywood takes a project and then completely, messes it up. It makes a hash out of it. And I think 83 particularly because it's a story that we've heard so many times. We've heard from so many people in so many different ways and so much has been written about it and, all of that. But I think I was pleasantly surprised. The movie manages to do some things well. It's long. I think, for example, one of the things that it manages to do quite well is the production value is pretty high. And I'm not talking about acting here necessarily. I'm sure we'll go into that, right? But just in terms of getting some of the details right, getting some of the casting right, getting some of the venues and the circumstances and all of those things right? It's clear that they've actually put effort into it. They've done research. And I think for Bollywood, I think that is pleasantly surprising in some sense. So for me, that was something that kept me hooked basically all the way through the 3 hours or whatever the length of the movie was. So anyway, that was sort of my first impression from the movie.
So I watched it very recently, right? I was on vacation and I had like 2 hours to kill on a flight. So
And so you watch cricket. Yeah, wow, great. That's a vacation. Yeah.
like that's a vacation, right? Like if it's my time away from the game and I decide, you know what, like let me prep for this podcast. It's a very long movie and like I ended up watching it at 1.25x and skipping all the songs. All right, because like that's the only way I can watch. Like I can watch a Bollywood movie nowadays because it's sometimes like, the movie is OTT in all the wrong places, but the things it does right all throughout, like it is scattered really well in a manner in which I didn't come away disappointed. I came away just feeling like, okay, that was good. It could have been so much better.
But by the way, go back and listen to this entire 2 minute segment that you just said, and it applies to the IPL also. Like watch on 2.5x could have been so much better. Anyway,
And
sorry.
cut out all the songs.
Cut out all the songs. That's the most
No,
important.
no, like what happened is, so I'm watching it on my tablet, all right, and the guy sitting to my left in the aisle seat, he was peering in. Okay, so I had tilted the tablet a bit because it's okay, like it's not a big deal. Subtitles are on, you can watch. I think the second he realized it's 83, he just noped. He's like, nah, it's okay, like whatever. And it felt weird because like no, I'm not this jingoistic person. I'm genuinely curious about what this movie is because like it's bound to be a jingoistic movie, right? Because it's a sports film about an Indian triumph. Way nationalism is handled in this film, it cannot be avoided. Like there is some kind of pride, and I will say it is very well placed. It's not misplaced to say that it's one of India's biggest triumphs in sports, right? So I could like put myself through all of that because there were so many tiny moments all throughout the film where like it just made me realize that like if they had spent a little more time in developing them, this would have been a much better film. But yeah, I came away feeling nice. I will just say that it wasn't that bad. I don't know why people were just like, it's like too meh or too like negative about it. It was entertaining.
I actually saw this movie over a period of 10 days. When I saw that it's 2 hours 40 minutes, I was like, I don't have this kind of time in my life at this point.
Every day I will watch one match of India. Like,
I know, yeah. It's like true dedication to the cause. Yeah.
Watch the movie like the IPL. That's
Watch
all.
the movie like the iPad. Watch the movie like an extended TV series. So I would see 15 minutes every day. And in those 15 minutes, I would actually pick up on something that I would really enjoy or really like. But at the same time, I would be like, oh, this is irritating me. Okay? Right from having the cameos of whether it's Mohinder Amarnath or the stills from the actual '83 World Cup, but at the same time some of the misplaced commentary about whether it's how the women were placed in the movie or just some things that were generally a bit off. So I felt quite conflicted throughout, but at the end of the movie when India won the World Cup, I mean, we all knew that was going to happen. It was a happy feeling at the end of the day, and I was like, I was happy to have spent that time, and I was like, okay, everyone who I know is a cricket fan should watch this movie just because it recreated memories that I didn't have in a way. And so, yeah, that was my takeaway from the movie.
I had a couple of highlights. I mean, I agree with most of what all three of you have said. The one thing that stood out for me, obviously, was some key casting choices. I thought someone like Ranveer carried the Kapil Dev role perfectly. I know some of the cricketing shots were not true to form. It was basically contrived in so many ways. But Ranveer getting his bowling action right, Kapil's bowling action right, or some of those Nataraja shots that he played, that sort of stuff, the detail was really good. And I read up a bunch later after watching the movie. So I know Balwinder Sandhu coached the entire team for a period of 6 to 8 weeks during the filming in the UK, apparently. And he's done a pretty good job of it. I also enjoyed Srikanth and Jiva's portrayal of it, which I thought was hilarious. I couldn't tell sometimes because they had this pre-shoot event, I think, in Bombay, which became a viral YouTube video. It felt like some of what Chika was saying on stage or blurting out on stage pretty much is what Jiva's dialogues were in parts of the film. So I really enjoyed those two, and I thought there was a bunch of really smart casting choices. Like I think Chirag Patil played his dad, which is a nice touch. And if I'm not wrong, Malcolm Marshall's son played
Marley
him
Marshall
as well.
Yes, Marley Marshall.
Mali Marshall played as well. So I thought those casting choices were rather nice, and those guys carried the movie well. The second thing was also the Bollywood touch. I felt like it could have been much worse, in the sense that they could have gone inside the West Indies dressing room and said, "Hey, let's take these." I mean, about how these Indians should be taken lightly. There's not much to play or whatever. I mean, it could have been so much worse. They could have gone to Kapil Dev's village, shown his childhood, and Rachana would have watched it for another 2 weeks, right? Like it would have been a 5-hour movie. So I did think that from a Bollywood standards point of view, from a historical precedent point of view, I thought it was one of the better ones. So yeah.
See, that is something I did feel I missed, because there was nothing new that really came out in the movie. Like, you knew what was going to happen, you knew the matches. I was hoping for some backstory with regard to Kapil Dev and his childhood, or something from any of the other players, or at least, if they bring Deepika Padukone, show something around what happened that led to that. And then at the same time, I'm like, but then it would have gone from 2 hours 40 minutes to a full 3-season series. So
Instead, we got Sachin Tendulkar, right? Somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a very, very gratuitous Sachin storyline. Yeah.
Are we saying Lagan is not a good cricket movie? Is that my take from all of
No,
this?
I think what we're saying is Lagan should be an IPL season on its own. No, but I want to go back to what Srinath said about casting, because that's something I explicitly wanted to talk about in today's show, right? So obviously, Srinath mentioned a couple of the casting choices, Mali Marshall, who played, Malcolm Marshall and so forth. But I think there were a lot of other nice touches also. There was, of course, there was the sort of cringy thing of Jimmy Amarnath playing Lala Amarnath, but then it was kind of also nice. Like the first time he comes on screen, it was nice. After that, it started getting a little tiring. It was like, fine, whatever. But all over, actually, if you go and look at the cast, right? I think this is on Wikipedia. Like I was looking at the cast after watching the movie. They actually, for example, had Carl Greenwich as Gordon Greenwich. So that's his son, Gordon Greenwich's son. They had Tej Narayan Chandapal, who was playing Larry Gomes. So, left-hander, they were doing that. There was Clive Lloyd's son, Jason Clive Lloyd, played Joel Garner. So they had a whole bunch of, especially I think in the West Indies team, they had a whole bunch of these smaller roles, guest appearances that people were playing. And then also, I think as far as sort of the Indian team was concerned, actually this is something that I want to throw open to you guys too, like what you thought about the casting. I think Jiva, obviously as Chika was, it worked out quite well. I think that really exemplified some of those things. Pankaj Tripathi did a great job, I think, as PR Man Singh. Like, I don't know about looking like him, but he really tried to nail like the Hyderabadi accent and, that sort of thing. So I think that comes off kind of nicely. The guy who played Gavaskar, Tahir Raj Bhasin, I think he did a pretty good job, I think, as Gavaskar. Boman Irani as Farooq, engineer was kind of cool too. So I don't know. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on the casting. I thought it was actually, like I said, this was part of what I was saying when I said I was pleasantly surprised. It looked like they'd done their homework as far as casting was concerned. Even for the smaller parts, I think they actually put a lot of thought into that.
Like, shout out to the guy playing Yashpal Sharma, dude. I cracked up, but I think his name is Jatin Sadhana, I think, right? So,
Yes,
like,
Jatin Sadhana,
what at least I would say I was looking forward to in every game is they were talking to each other in between runs, or like, I don't know how realistic those conversations are. I'm sure it's informed by like all the books and like all the videos that have come around it, but just they pulled it off really well, and that chatter is what made me want to watch the movie more. Like beyond and like the one time when they're trying to show them trying to party, right? And like Kapil Dev says something like I'm just the captain in the day, he's the captain at night. Like do whatever the heck you want, right? Like I fully if this was like Srinath said, if this was going to be full Bollywoodized or whatever, this would have been like, Kapil Dev would have been like a strict disciplinarian or something. Oh no, I would not allow this or whatever. So there were so many of these. They took many good calls with respect to where the story should go and how things should be said. But I don't know. I can't put my finger on where it fell short.
We'll come to the place where it fell short. Any other thoughts on the casting? Can we agree that everyone has said great things about the casting? I do agree. I think the casting has been phenomenal. Can we agree the worst cast person in the entire movie is Deepika Padukone?
Yeah.
Okay, can we agree on this, and then can we move on from there?
I agree. I think more than just casting, it's also
portrayal.
Yeah, why do you get her if you're not gonna talk
Yeah.
about her story? And she's literally arriving randomly in Kapil Dev's at the airport, and there's nothing after. She's just shown in the stands and in the hotel a couple of times. That's it.
Yeah, I'm actually honestly I'm very thankful they didn't just stick her in some random item number. I think that's the next step in the progression of yeah.
If it was a really intense Bollywood movie, Deepika Padukone would have run onto the field and told something to Kapil and saying, "You can do it for us."
They
and
they
then
could
come
have
back.
yeah, exactly. You know what? If they're going to fictionalize stuff, they should have at least recreated the Cadbury ad. Like that would have been nice at least. Come on, like do that.
So, agreed. One is the casting, and secondly is definitely the portrayal. Sometimes I wonder when they showcase women in movies that are very men dominated, like have they really taken the woman's perspective? And yeah, one is of course Deepika's role, but then you remember the scene about the pregnant woman going into labor, and she's like, "Tell me the score." I find it, I've never been pregnant, and I find it really hard to imagine that someone would actually say something like that during labor. And at the same time, the way they portrayed Deepika's emotions and Madan Lal's wife's emotions as well. And whatever I've read about Romi's character, it doesn't seem to have done justice to her. It shows her in a way they've heightened her emotions throughout. Either she's extremely emotional or she's just very jubilant. And I think this is just a very limiting way of portraying women and what the role they could actually what role they could actually be as partners of these cricketers.
So we spoke about how Romi Dev is portrayed the way she's portrayed in this particular movie, and the thing is that we also spoke about how it's really over the top. So in real life, right, Romi Dev was actually someone who wasn't even seen as such a huge cricket fan. Like, of course, she was supporting Kapil Dev, etc. But when the finals actually happened, when India was losing, she actually leaves to go do shopping. It's not like she leaves because she's despondent and she tears away the ticket and she goes back to the hotel room. No, they had to do all that for the movie. But she actually goes shopping, and then later she finds out, oh, actually India is winning. So she tries to come back, but then there is such a big crowd, she can't get back in, and she's like, okay, whatever. By all accounts, Romi Dev is never really seen as this huge supporter where she's like on the field cheering. But of course, they had to do a different portrayal of her in this movie. I'm going to talk about the climax because we spoke about over the top, and it probably comes back to all the things that we found really weird about this movie. Let me say what happens in the climax. I wrote this down, the sequence of events. So let me just say what happens. As India is winning the World Cup, there is a pregnant woman who is going into labor, and at that time there are two Indians who are basically like service Indians in London who are like serving in a bar or a restaurant, and as India win, they hold hands and run onto the pitch. Then immediately after that, somebody else is getting married. We don't know who's getting married. Somebody's getting married, the wedding is interrupted, somebody comes running in and says India has won. Everybody jumps up along with the priest, and they're all jumping up and down. At the line of control in Pakistan, they are basically listening to the radio as India win, and they look at each other. Meanwhile, the Indian soldiers have put their hands up and they're celebrating. The Hindu-Muslim riots are done. It's over. All communalism has been solved. Police who are doing security at this point in time are weeping. Train stations, when the train is going and the train is coming, people are like screaming and yelling. Cricket administrators have tears running down their eyes. Neena Gupta is holding people close to her and weeping, which is a little ironical, but we'll come to Neena Gupta in a bit. There is a shot of a temple, and in this temple there is a flag being waved and people are screaming, and just as the camera pans across, there is a mosque, and above the mosque as well, people are waving the flag and they're celebrating. There is an aeroplane landing, and as the aeroplane lands, there is a flight announcement made that India has won the World Cup. Everybody is jubilant. Drinks are served, and it finally ends with this curly-haired boy whom we know is Sachin, who says, "Maybe India kheliye khelega." That's where the movie ends. Please tell me, why do people think this movie is over the top? I don't really understand.
To defend what you said just a little bit, I was on a plane when India were playing New Zealand in the semi-final. All right. And the mid-air announcements had the scores. All right. Even after landing, they allowed us to run to the terminal to get to a TV or whatever, because like Dhoni was on strike. So that I would say is not I mean, fairly realistic. I would like. I'm sure you could have got the score on radio in like '83.
I would argue the way cricket is perceived in 2019 in India is very different than the way cricket is perceived in 1983 in India. But sure, let's go on. Now let's talk about what is over the top, people. What did we think was really, really over the top? What was going wrong?
A lot of it felt like, you hear these stories from your parents who were around at that time. As the years go by, the portrayals get that much more fantastical, out of touch with reality because they are aging and it's been 35 years since it happened. This felt like a movie made 35 years later because, what happened is exaggerated X times more because time has passed so much effectively. But having said that, I think just to go back to what Kaus was saying early on, I do think some of it is bare minimum nationalism par for the course for a movie like this. But the amount to which the cricket has gone into the background in the climax of this movie, that part I didn't get. You could have shown so much more of Lords, so much more of what happened on the scene, as opposed to 20 different scenes, like you mentioned, like a whole bunch of different parts of India are shown. Whereas the portrayals of Lords itself is kept to what I thought was a bare minimum. Like you could have shown so much more of the balcony, what happened, what the players were doing and so on. But instead it's this whole melange of things that happened around the country. So yeah, some of it exaggerated, sure, but some of it is also just like revisionist history 35 years later, pretty much.
Yeah, where it fell short was basically this thing of, I think they had all the material to go with when they were focusing on the cricket, right? Because they had the scorecards, they had, first-hand accounts of what happened during the matches, what happened around them and so on. But all these things back home in India, like if they really wanted to shift the focus of the camera from the action back to how people in India were perceiving it, I don't think they did enough research on that. I don't even know if the material exists, right? And that's why I think we're all talking about this. It came across basically as a series of WhatsApp forwards, right? Which were the screenplay was replaced by WhatsApp forwards, essentially, right? Very, very prescient. And yeah, I feel like it's not. I don't think it's a totally unreasonable idea to shift the lens of focus from the cricket to how it was being received back in India, right? Because remember, I don't know about you guys, right? But a lot of the stories that I grew up with my, parents and uncles and extended family and everybody who talked about this World Cup, whether they were, kids or teenagers or whatever, working at that time, a lot of those stories focused around how it was not like, first of all, cricket was not like this all-encompassing thing that everybody followed obsessively all the time, right? There would be like one person in like a given family or whatever who was like a cricket maniac or whatever, right? And then the other thing also was you had to follow it basically either via newspaper, maybe some people had transistor radios, and like literally one house in the entire mohalla or town would have like a TV, right? So, and also of course all the time zone things and all that. This would be like late in the evening or night in India and all that stuff, right? So I feel like there's an entire other movie there if they wanted to make it, like if they wanted to shift the focus and say, here's how India actually perceived this, and then contrast, like, here's how India of 1983 took something like this versus look at India of 2019 now, or India of 2021, right? They could have done that, but I think they kind of ran out of their budget, both in terms of cost and in terms of time. So I think that's the travesty there.
And I think more than over the top, there were many of these small scenes which they didn't go into depth, and obviously, we've discussed time was obviously an issue in this movie. And I was thinking about two things I noticed from a UK perspective. One is the riots, of course, and the violence that ensued after England lost. I, again, not sure how much research went into it, but I think that's, in a way, can be a bit limiting of how, Indians were treated at the time, or how that happened. I think whenever something like that is portrayed, there should be more context. And then that was more explicit. And then more subtly, there's a scene when they're in a pub in the UK and the servers are South Asian, and the servers are like happy. Yes. And then and on the other side, they're happy that India's winning. And then you can see all the other customers obviously like are giving them the looks. That was again a very interesting take, because this is something that I've seen quite a few times happen going to different pubs, not in London but in other parts of the UK. But again, to a person who is not from, or has not lived, or not had those kinds of experiences, it can create certain notions again in people's mind. I think this is again the question about the roles that a movie, the role of a movie, and the ideas that it plants in people's minds. So I think it's important to be careful about things like this. And I think whenever you show things in a very limited perspective, you run the risk of doing that.
It's like the time is so short, right? Like the only way they could portray these things is by falling back on stereotypes. Given all that you guys have said, I'm getting a very like Game of Thrones vibe from this, where like the second they ran out of book material, they were just like winging it, and they fell back on like because like the actual games and how people interact with each other, it's very well documented, like you said, right? Whereas all the other things like potentially the scuffles that broke out in the stadium, how the riots were handled in India, how like I don't know, like the pregnant woman randomly popping up saying I won the score or something, these are like, I would assume it's like imaginations in nikal rahe. Like I don't think there is or maybe there's anecdotal documentation of it. It's not like a very well-known or storied history behind reactions to it. So I think if you talk about it that way, like when I was saying earlier that we could not tell where the movie fell short, it's like when they were trying to like, we don't care for the reactions, everybody was jubilant, and when it came down to actually showing the cricket and actually showing the interactions between people, like those things it pulled off really well.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like the point about Game of Thrones is pretty accurate, right? Like they've done their research by interviewing the players, all of whom were in the UK, were in London. They've done their interviews with Man Singh, who was the manager. But outside of that, the board officials were there back then. Most of them are no more. The parents of these cricketers who would have had first-hand accounts of what happened at home, I'd imagine most of them are no more as well. And someone like Yashpal Sharma passing away between the start of the movie and the movie releasing is kind of telling about the sort of decreasing accounts of people who are actually there when this whole thing happened, right? So I think to cut them a little bit of slack, they did have limited research material to work with. And the most natural thing to do with is fall to stereotypes and, make up and patch up the missing parts of the jigsaw effectively. That's what's happened.
I think, it's true that there is, one can argue that, okay, fine, you went a little over the top with like riots and Indira Gandhi coming and saying that, oh, let us make the cricket match happen because that's going to be a solution to riots. Fair. I understand some of these things are stuff where you may not have access to stuff, but there are a lot of things that you do have access to. And the very, very interesting part of this movie is that they stick to the facts, they stick to all of these little anecdotes, these little trivia that you think is like, oh, this is true, and they go all the way there, and then they push it by 20%. So when you do that, when you're watching the movie, there are all of these little things that you see, and there were many parts of the movie where I watched and I thought, nay, there's no way this could have happened, this is probably over the top. And then later I found out, oh no, it's not over the top. This was actually something that was true. Like for instance, when Man Singh goes in the beginning and says that, hey, can I get into Lords? And they say, no, the tickets are basically for everything and not Lords. That was true. And I expected that, this is one of those movies where, of course, the Indian is going to the British guy and the British guy is saying, tum gulam log to nahi, you can't get into Lords. But I found out it's largely true. Perhaps it wasn't as rude as it was portrayed in the movie, but it was broadly true. Similarly, if you look at the Kapil Dev, when he comes back and he comes out with the bat, he changes the bat and comes out when he blows the 175 against Zimbabwe. That is also true. He did change the bat. But here's the place where they push it by 20%. So when Kapil Dev, for instance, when he comes back, here's the context. So the context is he's playing Zimbabwe. It's essentially one of the last few league games. And India has to, again, this is what I mean by the movie pushing it. It's an important game for India. The movie makes it into a must-win game for India. It says that if India lose this game, they're out of the tournament. They were not. It was going to be much more difficult for them if they lose. So it was really important for them. Second, Kapil Dev is, of course, inside the shower when this is happening. Again, it's true. This did happen. So when all the wickets are falling, Kapil was inside the shower. But of course, the entire part where people are like banging on it and saying, Kapil, come out. And Kapil is like, you guys are playing a prank. Of course, that's the extra 20%. He comes out, he scores the stuff that looks really nice. Like if you watch Turnbridge Wells, you see the rhododendron bushes all around it. Even today, if you look at photos of it, because there's no video footage, it is accurate. That's exactly like how the ground looks at it. And so points for like going for accuracy. But when he comes back inside, then he basically says, Talwar Nikal. And I don't know about whether Talwar was there or not there, that is the word. he did come out with a different bat. It wasn't the mongoose bat, because the mongoose bat comes much later. It only comes in 2010. It was made famous by Matthew Hayden, I think, when he was playing for CSK in the IPL. Before that, this was just a regular Slazenger bat, which the corners cut off because it made it a little lighter. Of course, the mongoose bat took it there. Then he's like hitting the bat and the ball breaks the glass and falls among the teammates, and suddenly everybody wakes up. I mean, this is the stuff that starts to annoy me. And by the way, when it is done, you think by the end of this, if you don't know anything about the history, that this probably did not happen. Then you read it and say, oh, all of it happened. I wonder if the manager also went to the terrace and stood there and saluted him under the flag. Then you're like, oh, okay, that didn't happen. All right, cool. This is the annoying part of the movie. The whole movie, this is what is so annoying. The cricket has a lot of dramatic moments as it is. But no, we have to turn it up to 11. And we have to turn it up to 11 all the way.
I didn't expect a lot, honestly. It feels like they did standalone shots of bowlers and batsmen, stitched it together in a way. I mean, because I knew this before watching the movie, I wasn't disappointed, but it would have been nice to have some actual cricket playing out as opposed to these rapidly edited shots coming together. I know the movie is not for people to watch a highlight reel of the World Cup, but having said that, they did have Balwinder Sandhu, like I said, with them throughout the entire filming phase of the movie. What I really liked was some of the net sessions that they did. I think the scene where Gavaskar talks to Sandhu about hiding his in-swinger and teaching him how to do it, and then they show the actual thing playing out in real life. I did think some of that was a nice touch, but even there, PGK, I think there's a scene where Chika shouts out when Kapil's hyping up the West Indies quartet, right? Say like, ye cricket hai ya horror movie or something like that. It was so annoying. Like, unnecessary, right? Like, just show the net session, show us what happened. I mean, I know you want to have Chika speak Hindi for the entire movie. I'd have loved to watch that movie. But the point is that you don't need to dramatize every single thing, guys. Like, that was my feeling. I thought the net shots were particularly nice, but the movie itself, well,
the net shots were nice, but very clumsy exposition. I mean, as if like the Indian cricketers don't know who, Garner
Right.
and Holding and
Right.
Marshall, that they know who they are. It's also the same thing. Again, when Chika comes into bat, he's looking at Gomes and saying, why are you standing so back? As if he does not know why he's standing so back. It's not like Chika has just wandered into the game and he's like, oh, this is a bat. What's happening here? Let's see. So there are all of these little things that started to annoy me a bit. But yeah, like I said, I felt like the cricket had a lot of drama in itself, which they didn't exploit.
What did you think about the sledging and the dialogues that were happening between the different players?
There was one part that made me very uncomfortable, and that is actually in the final when Deepika Padukone's character Romi Dev is sitting there, and there is this black woman who's coming in front of her face and like literally screaming into her face, saying that we will eat you alive. Okay, and I'm like, really, did you have to do this? Is it necessary? Do you not know about already really uncomfortable stereotypes about how African Americans, or in this case West Indian people, were seen? Like you play up the whole, oh, they are monsters and they're cannibals and they're this thing. Like, really, do you have to use those words? Is it necessary? So those were the things that made me uncomfortable. Other than that, actually, I was actually slightly quite happy there wasn't that much sledging on the field as I expected. Quite honestly, I thought there'd be much more.
Because I was watching it so fast, the cuts between the action shot cuts didn't bother me as much, right? And the CGI was pretty good. Like, in terms of, like, everybody knows what a square cut is and like what an on drive is, or how to take a catch or whatever. Like, it's those middle. It's like the sledging portrayed in the film, I felt was a little tasteful. I felt when in running between the wickets they were talking to each other, that was good. So all those moments where even that one scene which turned out to be true, right, where he goes to a Tamil house, Chika goes to a Tamil house with like a family saying, listen, you guys get to eat non-veg everywhere, I don't get to do this, right? Yeah. Like, so it had enough moments for me to just put up with the points where it goes like horribly awry. So, like, I at least I would say that much. Like, and I don't expect it to be historically accurate. It's very clearly a celebration of the '83 World Cup, right? So, some level of like many of these sports films, they take that creative liberty. Like, which is that Brian Clough film where they portrayed him to lose games when turns out he just had a bunch of draws, right? And like
Is that Damned United? No.
Damned United, yeah. Right, so like there are in sports movies, like you can give it. It's okay. You will expect, and because like I said, it's a national team, so thoda national pride will be hyped up. Like if this was a club team, you wouldn't have those emotions.
It also comes with the territory, right? Like I think Kabir Khan's movies generally have this. Like I think the last one was Ek Tha Tiger, and there was a Salman Khan movie as well. Like he kind of goes into extreme nationalistic portrayals, but somehow I think borderline jingoism and not like the worst of it.
Yeah, I think one thing I was going to bring up was I think as a cricket fan, I was disappointed with the short shrift that Mohinder Amarnath was given, right?
Yes.
So it was, I brought this up on the group also, I think, last week when we were talking about this. It's almost like, he made a deal with the devil where they told him, you can play your dad and we get to mutilate your character in return. Like, the guy was man of the match in like the semi-final and the final, and none of that comes out, right? It's just, he's just sitting there. Like, in fact, I think I'll have to go back and check, but I almost think that the real Mohinder Amarnath playing Lala Amarnath has more screen time in the movie than his actual character. And I thought that was a travesty, like especially given that, look, I would have understood if this was a movie like centered on Kapil Dev and only about his exploits and only Ranveer Singh and all that stuff. That's not true, right? Because everybody sort of gets their day in the sun. Chika is sort of always present as this sidekick character. A bunch of other people like Madan Lal and Roger Binney and Balwinder Singh Sandhu and all these people get sort of their day in the sun. But no Mohinder Amarnath, like I didn't understand the reason for that. So I think that was a bit of a travesty. So yeah.
I also came out with one unanswered question on the cricketing side. So David Frith, the old British journalist and historian, having been made to eat his words, which is literally a piece of paper, and PR Man Singhs seems to have been the guy who wrote that letter originally. He's also narrated the same on Gaurav Kapoor's Spotify show, 22 Yarns, right? Where it turns out that it was not this PR Man Singhs, but some other PR Man Singhs who was living in the United States. Does anyone know what the real story here is?
What I'll tell you what I do know, and you've covered most of it. So it's true that David Frith did write that initially, and it's true the ending is also true, which is that he eats his words, but you're right that it is not, PR Man Singhs is not the person who basically sends that letter to him saying that, hey, you did this. If I'm not wrong, I'm not sure if it is someone who lives in the United States or someone
yeah. So I think Sidvi had tweeted about this, right. I think last month. So yeah, it was some guy called Power Man Singh from New Jersey. I actually just put the link to that letter, which you guys can click on. We'll put it in the show notes. So there's an entire like PDF of that letter and all that stuff. So yes, you're right. It was a PR Man Singhs, but not that PR Man Singhs. And actually, so the thing is, so one of the things that I did after watching the movie was I went and read up a whole bunch about PR Man Singhs because that was fascinating to me. Like I didn't know, like I knew about this PR Man Singhs character. I didn't know, for example, that he was this big shot in like the Hyderabad cricket scene and that he came from Hyderabad and all that stuff, right? And so when Pankaj Tripathi sort of got that whole accent down and he was doing that, I was like, initially when it started out, right, I was like, why does this guy have like a random Hyderabadi accent? Like why is he, why does he have a Dakhni Hindi accent? And then I read about PR Man Singhs, and actually PR Man Singhs has had a very distinguished career, right? Like, I mean, obviously this is sort of the cherry on top of the cake, but he was a very able administrator in the Hyderabad cricket scene for a very long time and all that. But I think this was a different PR Man Singhs. Yeah.
We will also link out to the 22 Yarns episode from the show notes with PR Man Singhs. It's a really nice hour-long thing about his cricketing career, which never really took off, and then how he got into cricket administration, and how he overcame a bunch of contenders to become the manager of that team in '83, which is again interesting.
Yeah. And Karthik, come to your point on Mohinder Amarnath, just reminded me of a conversation I had with my mother yesterday. So she actually had similar feedback after seeing the movie. She was like, during the '83 World Cup, Mohinder Amarnath was probably the most loved in the cricket team after Kapil Dev, and yet they didn't do justice to his role. And she was like, the way they portrayed Sunil Gavaskar, so he performed quite terribly. I mean, and it's kind of showed, but at the same time, it's like, all the West Indians, all the cricketers are really happy to have bowled out Sunil Gavaskar. They look at him as a real threat. And I went back and looked at Gavaskar's stats. His highest during the World Cup was 25 runs. His average was 9 runs. And yet he had a more prominent role than Mohinder Ramanathan did. So I think that's a fair point.
I think some of that Gavaskar thing, you can see it from a filmmaker's lens because there's more tension there, right? Like they're trying to exploit that whole thing of, okay, this was a guy who was the captain before and, there's bound to be some tension with the new captain and this and that. I mean, I think for what it's worth, I think they handled that well. I think, again, I said this when we were talking about the cast, but I think the guy who plays Gavaskar actually did it quite well. Like it was a nice, he had this quiet dignity about him, but he also had that whole sort of, I don't even know what it is. It's that sort of tenaciousness that we associate with Sunny Gavaskar, right? Like the guy is sure of himself and he knows that he can go toe to toe with the best in the world, right? He's taken them on and all of that.
And also got the stance right. The batting stance was spot on.
True. Yeah.
It was really good.
I was saying that, look, obviously this movie has been made with the consent of everybody who has been in that team. So anything that they portray on the screen, they had to obviously do it. I'm sure they ran it by the entire team members to say it's quote unquote approved. Exactly. Yeah. But despite that, the part that I was really confused by was this entire tension between, which is what you said, Karth, about the tension between Gavaskar and Kapil Dev at this point in time. Yes, as Rachana said, Gavaskar has been playing terribly at this time, but he has been replaced by Kapil. And there's only one point when this tension actually comes to the fore. And this tension comes to the fore where Kapil Dev, after some game, I think it's the game against the West Indies where they lose, he turns to Sunil Gavaskar and says, "High time you get run, Sunny Bhai." Okay, and then Sunil Gavaskar does not like that. And then that evening he's having coffee, brooding by himself, and PR Man Singh comes there, and then Sunny says, "No, not now." And so PR Man Singh says something really unusual. He says that, no, I don't understand why Kapil has to speak in English. What he's actually doing is he's thinking in Punjabi and he's translating in English. What he wanted to say was that Kapthak runs will be hidden away from you. But that's not what he said. He didn't say why runs hidden come you. He didn't say that. He said high time you get right. It has nothing to do with that altogether. Right. And then finally Sunil Gavaskar is smiling and saying, yes, I completely understand. And then their friends say, what is going on? How is this scene this thing? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't matter which PR is being portrayed where. All PR is good PR.
The other part that really annoyed me was, if it was possible to have commentary that was worse than the IPL commentary, it is the commentary in this entire movie. What is this? I mean, I understand Boman Irani is playing Farooq Engineer, but why is he sitting with some guy whom I was thinking after a while was White Arnab? Essentially, it was that because clearly it was that. Look, in 1983, the commentators are extremely staid. The commentators are extremely controversial. This person is taking it to another level. When there is rain, he's like, "Oh, the Indians have escaped. They've had a great escape here. The rain has come and saved them." No, who says that?
It's like some
Why would anyone say that?
school sports day on some loudspeaker mic situation, right? Just shouts out loud every time some movement is happening on the field. This guy is making one big announcement and it's right in your ear. Literally, that's what's happening.
Very strange. Any other thoughts on the movie? Things that we liked, did not like, things that we found unusual? Can there be a sequel? Okay, let's talk about it.
On what? On the 2011 work?
2011 or 85? What do you want?
85 would be interesting, actually. Actually, I think 85 would be interesting because I don't think people don't know about it. Very few people know about it.
I can't wait for Shastri to be the centerpiece of a movie. That'll be cool.
Yeah.
What are you saying? Not Shastri. The centerpiece is going to be the red Audi. It's not going to be Shastri. It's going to be the car. What are you talking about? No, but actually, it'll be very cool because we'll have a whole bunch of characters that can come out, right? Like we'll have a bunch of people from the Pakistan team. We'll have our favorite LS.
Maybe he can take a 6-month break from commentary. That'd be good.
I know we're talking about the movie and sequels, but watching this movie and then, as Shabash Mittu is going to be released on July 15th now and Julian Goswami's movie as well, it got me to start thinking what was the impact of the 83 World Cup on women's cricket. And so I don't know if you know, but India hosted the 1978 Women's Cricket World Cup. And we played in the one after that as well. I think it was 82, I want to say so. But after 83 and India winning the World Cup, the India women's team just completely lost its sponsorship. The entire focus went on to men. And so we actually didn't even play in the World Cup that happened right after. And when you talk about a sequel, the one thing that, and you all know how passionate I am about women's cricket. I do hope that, we're one day able to see a chronicle of the journey of women's cricket in India and the interplay between both men's and women's cricket.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's a really, really good point. That, it supercharged men's cricket in India, but then, what it did to women's
at the
cricket.
expense of, because
Yeah.
at that time cricket was a zero-sum thing. So
Yes.
obviously the women's cricket.
I mean, not just cricket, sport in general in India has been a zero-sum thing, right? It's like what cricket gains, everything else loses, right? So, or what men's cricket gains, everything else loses. So,
Any other closing thoughts?
No, I would recommend this film to everybody. Like
One time pass watch says
100%, 100%, 100%. Leave your brain at home. Leave your brain at home and watch this.
yeah, no, I think we should say that. I think we've been kind of flirting around it, but I don't think any of us actually said it was a bad movie. I think,
No.
that's kind of the whole, sort of the reason that we have found 1 hour to talk about it, right? Is that it's not a bad movie by any measure. It's actually, in some sense, surprisingly good. On many counts, like it could have been much worse. I think that should be the tagline for this thing. Like 83 the movie, it could have been way worse, but it wasn't, and I think that's a credit to the filmmakers.
One thing that I will say is that I thought one of the best parts of the movie was Ranveer, which again I didn't expect because I thought he would play this really over the top caricature, but he doesn't. I think he's actually one of the best parts of the movie. He captures a lot of the essence of Kapil, not just like,
Absolutely.
of course, his bowling action, of course, all of those things, but the essence, the insecurity. He does not come across as someone. He does not have one big speech.
Yeah.
Not one. He does not have one big
Hero moment.
25
Yeah.
minute hero moment
Right.
speech. He doesn't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
that. He's just like, he comes across as awkward.
No, for someone who's by far the biggest star in the cast, obviously Deepika gets a role, etc. But as someone who's in the entire movie, I think the biggest compliment that can be said is if you go to the theater or to the movie thinking you want to watch Ranveer, you actually don't get it. You actually get a Kapil Dev throughout those 3 hours, which is pretty amazing for somebody of his stature.
Thank you so much for listening in. That was episode 17. We discussed 83. Starting from next week, we will go back from the real world to the real world, to use a cliche, and we will find out what's happening with the IPL, and we're going to go back to all the other developments in world cricket. Until then, it's goodbye from me. I'm PGK. Say bye, everybody else.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
TV umpire to director, we have a player review. Can we rock and roll, please?